before we start, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about who we are. So Save Greater Manchester Greenbelt came into existence because ordinary constituents from all walks of life across GM were concerned about a regional housing plan, the GMSF. This plan promoted Greenbelt loss. So the Greenbelt across GM is performing a wide range of functions for residents. It's a place of sanctuary for improving mental health. It's areas to exercise and practice hobbies for dog walking, horse riding, cycling, rambling, nature spotting, just to name a few. It's home to the rural economy, including farming and equestrian, and supports rural jobs. It provides much needed habitat and space for nature to thrive. It helps communities keep their sense of identity and place in the world. And also, we have two really important peatlands which are critical to preserving global biodiversity, minimising flood risk and helping to address climate change. So SGMGB is an umbrella group for Greenbelt and Green Space groups. We've got over 50 groups at present. And we come together to share ideas, plan campaigns for engagement of our local communities and lobby our elected representatives. We're a true grassroots movement and one of the largest community action groups in the country. We're not planning experts, but in order to understand the impact that GMSF was going to have, we've had to navigate national and local planning policy, a spatial plan document, all associated topic papers, reports, and obviously the consultations. Within our groups, there are areas of special interest such as air pollution, the climate emergency, affordable housing, sustainable transport, and equitable communities. So I'm going to just run down the list just so everybody knows who's here. So we have Andy Burnham, who is our current mayor for the Labour Party. Laura Evans is the Conservative Party candidate. Melanie Horrocks, who is the candidate for the Green Party. Michael Elston, who is an Independent candidate. Simon Lepori for the Liberal Democrats and Stephen Morris for the English Democrats. So we're going to move to opening statements where each candidate is going to have up to 2 minutes. Candidates who finish before their timer can indicate the end of their statement by saying thank you. So we want to put party politics aside in this. I think we're all a bit bored with infighting and lack of action. So this is your chance to show us who you are, what you would like to achieve as GM Mayor. So please keep that in mind when answering your opening statement and throughout the questioning. So we're going to move to Andy Burnham, who is going to be our first to speak. So this opening statement, we've listed them in alphabetical order of first name. So Andy, when you're ready, take it away.
Okay, thanks very much, Zoe. Good morning, everybody. In 2016, I inherited a Greenfield preference plan, the original spatial framework, that in my view was a plan to build for the car, and it would have led to decaying town centres surrounded by urban sprawl. So what I've done over the last few years is completely turn that around, listening to you, the groups on this call. The 2020 plan was very different, a strong brownfield preference policy at the heart of it, and a reduction in the Greenbelt take from 2016 of 60%. Now that's been hard given the government targets have kept changing and have gone up as they did with respect to Manchester recently, but still we've brought about a massive change and we've listened to people. So this is a vision for a very different Greater Manchester. It needs to be seen alongside our B network, the plan for the biggest cycling and walking infrastructure in the country, the plan for the clean air zone, which if we get the right government support, we would bring through, and also our plan for a London-style public transport system in Greater Manchester. And that's what I'll bring it all towards in terms of the vision that I want and I've set out as mayor. It's a vision for a greener Greater Manchester, more livable communities, revitalised town centres, and look at what's happening in Stockport with the Mayoral Development Corporation as the prime example of that, with 3,500 homes being built connected to a new Stockport interchange. Overall, what we're trying to do is build more affordable homes in our town centres linked to public transport so that we are no longer building for the car and making our problems and our challenges worse. So I'll finish, Zoe, by saying that, you know, it's obviously been a challenging process, but I hope people would recognise that I've been listening all the way through. And what we have now is a vision for Greater Manchester with more livable communities, better public transport, and enhancing the green space that we've got. And I think that's the right plan for our future. And with that, I will hand back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Andy. Super. So we're going to move on to the next candidate now, which is Laura Evans for the Conservative Party. So you can start now, Laura.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here today. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. The role of Greater Manchester Mayor is a big job with a big budget and big responsibilities to bring about change. And so it really matters who does this job. The election is a chance for people to send a message that they want change. Change in the way policing is led in Greater Manchester, change to make sure public transport works for the people who need it, and change to make sure that every community in Greater Manchester benefits from investment and new jobs, not just those in Manchester city centre. As Mayor, I would offer new leadership, work with the government to deliver a better plan. Many people across Greater Manchester in the last election voted for change. They felt their votes had been taken for granted by Labour for decades, and again we are seeing a continuation of this theme with the Greenbelt. The newly named Places for Everyone is the same plan under a different name. It still fails to listen to residents and community groups. The new plan is still to concrete all over our Greenbelt, and at a time when we need to look to rebuild our towns and city centres, and we know that the vital role our Greenbelt, parks and countrysides have played during COVID, it's vitally important we reconsider. I was a Trafford councillor and, like many, was led to believe that the Labour Mayor's GMSF plan would save the Greenbelt. It didn't, and it won't. My plan, if elected as a Greater Manchester Mayor, is to work with residents and community groups in every city, town and village throughout Greater Manchester to protect our Greenbelt by completing what Stockport Labour-led council already started, pulling out of the GMSF. I will scrap this out-of-date, highly political and damaging plan in my first day of office and consign it to the bin. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So we're going to move on to Melanie now. So Melanie, if you can start when you're ready. Yasmin, stop the clock if you can. Melanie, can you hear us?
Right. I can, yes. Sorry, it wouldn't let me press my unmute button. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. You can start when you're ready.
Thank you. Apologies. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to Save Greater Manchester Greenbelt for him to speak to. Agreeing across all of the 10 Greater Manchester boroughs that can be a pressure point on all parties to act on climate change.
Sorry, Melanie.
Improve our transport, housing. As your Green Mayor, yes.
Sorry, Melanie. I think it's your bandwidth. If you want to turn your camera off, it might be easier for sound. I've just paused you for a second.
I will do. Okay.
Do you want to start? Sorry.
Is that any better?
Perfect.
Yeah. I'll just continue where I was. So as your Green Mayor, I would ensure our
Yasmin, we're still
Greenbelt land is COVID has how important green space was.
Yasmin?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're having a problem with the line, aren't we?
Yeah. Melanie, sorry. We'll ask you.
That's okay.
Can we work through the other candidates and come back to Melanie at the end?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So if we could move on to Michael Elston, who is an independent. Are you there, Michael?
Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Yeah, if you want to start when you're ready.
Right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. I'm going to start off topic on a matter that is such an extremely important matter that I think at the moment any political discussion should start with it, and that's what's been going on in our hospitals for the last year. Specifically, NHS England's reintroduction of the Liverpool care pathway. Last year, in response to COVID-19, NHS England, sanctioned by the government, sent out instructions to doctors to end patients' lives prematurely by injecting them with morphine and midazolam. Midazolam is the drug used for executions in the USA, and depriving them of food and water. And this has been happening not just to elderly people who are at the end of their lives, but to young people, people in their 30s and 40s, who most likely would have survived if they'd been treated. This is now the most terrible tragedy in British history, and it's still going on. This was used to cover up the fact that our hospitals were overwhelmed, that this country didn't have the capacity to treat everyone, and that we fared less well in coping with COVID-19 than more or less anywhere else in the world. In terms of, just quickly, in terms of Greenbelt policies, I'm very much against building on any Greenbelt. It simply isn't necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Okay, we're going to move on to Simon from the Liberal Democrats. Simon, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
So if you're ready to start, you can do so.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me here, everyone. Thank you for getting up early this morning and being part of this. I love Greater Manchester. I've lived up in Stretford now for 15 years in Trafford, not unlike some of the other candidates. And I think it can be a great place to live. When we're at our best, when we come together as a city region, we're a shining light to the country and the world. And at the moment, as already been alluded to, the past year has been incredibly difficult. We've been without our friends and our family for long periods of time. And that brings us on to the GMSF, or Better Homes for Everyone, whatever you want to call it now, and saving the Greenbelt, because COVID's changed everything. How do we know how we want to live for the next 10 years? Will communities still want to live in sprawling estates on the edge of the city region, or do they actually want to live closer to people, to feel a sense of greater community? I'll always say this. In 2017, when the last mayoral election was, I worked on the campaign with Jane Brophy, and we went into that campaign steadfast against the GMSF. We wanted to scrap it then, and we want to scrap it now. We need to use the local plans that the government are making local councils create to actually build a proper plan for the entirety of Greater Manchester. And a point worth noting as well on these Greenbelt figures and these house building figures.
I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there because we've done our 2 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Morris, are you with us?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, yes. Do you want to start?
Yes, I will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Stephen Morris. I'm the English Democrat candidate for Mayor of Greater Manchester. I stood in the 2017 mayoral election. I am born and bred in Greater Manchester, like somebody's already mentioned about other candidates. All my family's here, so this is where I live. I campaigned in 2017 to stop building on Greenbelt land. I was on various protests to stop building on Greenbelt land, and that is still my view. There will be no building on Greenbelt land if I am mayor. That is very simple one. No matter how they try to rephrase it, better homes for people or Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, no matter how they put a spin on it, the basic is there's been no building on Greenbelt land. We have to use the brownfield sites first, but with the issue of COVID and the way people work now from home, it needs to be developed into with public transport, because obviously public transport is a major concern because people are moving away from it because of the close proximity with other people of travelling. So we need to develop a transport system linked with not building on Greenbelt land. The English Democrat policy is quite simple, that the resources of this land, we're just guardians of it for future generations. We have to protect it for future generations. And going forward, we have to make sure that building on Greenbelt is the very last resort. And at the moment, it seems to be, well, we'll use it here, we'll use it there. We'll rephrase a Greenbelt land as Greenfield, and then eventually we'll categorise it as something else, and then we can develop on it. No, it's quite simple. We saw through people having to exercise from the homes going onto fields and areas of green land, that the mental health benefits was really beneficial to them getting out of their homes. So it is very important that we keep our green fields, our green belts, and not build on them.
Thank you, Stephen. That's the end of your 2 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Melanie, can we come back to you? Can we just see if your audio is any better?
Yes, is it sounding better now? I think
you're still
in the entire house.
Yeah, you're still dropping out a little bit, but if you continue to drop out, we will just stop you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Do you want me to start again or start from where I was?
Start again, please.
Okay, thank you. So again, hopefully you can all hear me now. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Save Greater Manchester Greenbelt for inviting me to speak today. A vote for me will place a green in every room, a green across all of the 10 Greater Manchester boroughs that can be at the pressure point on all parties to act on climate change, act on inequalities, and improve our transport, housing, and healthcare. As your Green Mayor, I would ensure our Greenbelt land is protected. COVID has shown us how important green space is, and it has also shown us the value of strong communities. We need affordable green homes that are built to create communities, not just houses that are built to tick boxes to appease Westminster. Our transport system isn't working. We will tackle climate change by creating a joined-up transport system that has active travel at its heart. Now is our opportunity, as we hopefully move to post-COVID, to rebuild our transport network, to move away from the reliance on cars, give people pedal power to safely cycle across the region, and give more options to transport for Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester built the Industrial Revolution, and with me as your Green Party Mayor, together we can build the Green Revolution, creating new sustainable jobs, delivering safe, affordable housing, and holding our Labour-led councils to account to ensure Greater Manchester plays its part in tackling the climate emergency. A vote for me on the 6th of May is the opportunity to challenge the established parties and to give a green voice to speak to every Greater Manchester resident. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's great. Okay, we're going to now move on to questions. And we're going to start with Stephen. So, Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So question 1, too many councils are simultaneously declaring climate emergencies while promoting high carbon infrastructure like new roads and developments throughout the city region. This includes an expansion of Manchester Airport. So our question to all candidates will be, if elected during the period of your office, what do you think is the most effective way to reduce the carbon footprint in Greater Manchester? Each candidate is going to have 1 minute 30 to answer the question. So, Stephen, if you're ready, you can start now.
Well, I campaigned on this previously where I would encourage people to go onto public transport. I don't believe in the congestion charge. I campaigned against that previously. I know there is plans to try and bring a congestion charge in via the back door on the zero zones, the zero emission zones. back door. There is plans on that. That wouldn't happen under my mayoralty. It's to encourage people onto public transport. But I also had plans to reduce the carbon footprint by making sure all industrial units have their own solar panels built on top. That restrictions on car parking spaces were put in place so that people was encouraged to use public transport. So there was actually plans already in place. We would make it a greener environmental area, but it wouldn't be a taxed area, because the taxing would, especially going forward now where the economy's been absolutely decimated by the Conservatives, the issue would be to make sure that the smaller businesses, local businesses, can still use the transport that they need without being taxed, and therefore we can make sure that they're protected, the environment's protected in our area with solar panels, with public transport, and protecting our Greenbelt land, and all that will reduce our carbon footprint without the tax burden, which is usually a Labour plan, isn't it? Usually tax and spend, that's what the usual plan is. And we've seen that with a 5% increase on the mayoral precept just on policing, on a policing system that's just gone into special measures. And we're
Thank you, Stephen. We're out of time.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Simon will be next. So Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I've had this conversation over the past few weeks with a lot of people. I think one of the things we can look at in Greater Manchester is our recycling and waste system. We want to make sure that we decommission incinerators in this city region. And that'll take a lot of work and a bit of time, but it's something that I would aim for. I actually do agree with Stephen, getting more people onto public transport and limiting the amount of car parking spaces within the city centre and town centres is actually something we can do, but you've got to have the actual transport infrastructure to do that. It's pointless limiting car parking spaces in, say, a village centre or a small town centre in Greater Manchester without any buses, without any trains, without any trams going there. So actually fully integrating the transport system, something our current mayor has mentioned in his opening statement, is something that needs to be moved on quicker than it has been. And using a London style zone system, we already have it for the Metrolink. I want to be able to get on a bus in some of the outer parts of Greater Manchester, travel to a tram station, and then travel on a tram line, and then get off and onto a train, travel to my final destination point.
Simon, I'll have to stop you. Have to stop you there, but there is a question on transport later, so you will get a chance to elaborate.
Sorry.
That's fine. Thank you so much. We move to Michael Elston. So Michael, can you hear me?
Yes.
Super, off you go.
Well, at the moment, I'm becoming very interested in airships. And in just the last couple of years, there's been amazing advances in the technology behind airships. They use aluminium, so they're sustainable. They're relatively cheap to manufacture and to maintain, and they don't need runways. And at the moment, they're being used for cargo transport. But in just the next couple of years, there will be potential to also use them for passenger transport. In terms of public transport, other forms of public transport, I want to bring more manufacturing industries to Greater Manchester. So at the moment, we have buses, the chassis are manufactured in China, the bodies are manufactured in Scotland. If we're trying to cut down carbon emissions, it's not very helpful transporting them halfway around the world. We have the skills here to manufacture ourselves. There is a company already in Greater Manchester manufacturing electric 15-seater coaches. And they've now manufactured an electric minibus as well. So that's another form of transport that we don't really have in this country.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks.
That's really interesting, and we like the idea of having enterprise and business and things being made locally. So that's a really good point. Thank you. So can we have Melanie again? So Melanie, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Super, off you go.
Thank you. I mean, I will come back to transport, as you said that there is a question coming up on that, but that is a very key issue. And it isn't just a question, as some have already said, of providing more buses or more opportunity to public transport. It's actually making active travel, as I said in my opening, at the heart of what our transport policy is. And that includes having a system where people can, as they do across Europe very successfully, cycle to the tram, put their bike on, cross Greater Manchester using our transport system, and get off and cycle at the other end to be able to access our city freely and easily. The other thing that I will bring up is actually how effective we have been when we've got elected Greens sitting on local councils, and how they make sure that declaring a climate emergency isn't the end of matters. It actually keeps the pressure on. I know in Tameside only recently documentation was produced dealing with these sorts of issues, and the climate emergency wasn't mentioned once within that documentation. That can't be how a serious community with climate emergency resolutions passed deals with matters. That's why having a Green in every room, having me in every room to make sure the climate emergency is the focus of all discussions is actually the best thing that could be done to deal with carbon emissions across Greater Manchester.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Super, off you go.
So clearly we need to deliver transport links across the whole of the region. We need more electric charging points. At this moment in time, we have less charging points than the whole of Wandsworth in the whole of Greater Manchester. So we're significantly low on that. So therefore encouraging people to take more electric cars, more obviously bus and tram services, and they need to be the cleaner, greener buses. And that should you go to towns and villages across the whole of Greater Manchester to benefit everyone. There are, obviously, if you're going to transport later, there's more to discuss on that about the impact on trees, and obviously clearly the Greenbelt. If we're going to build on that, that would be a significant mistake if we're actually trying to look to reduce the carbon footprint. The other thing is we have had huge amounts of investment from the government with regards to retrofitting. It's part of their green deals, our buildings, so that they become carbon neutral. And this is a huge investment. I think we've had 80 million already in Greater Manchester to be able to refit our civics buildings and invest in our homes. And these kind of significant inputs of investment to do that are clearly an agenda to clean up our emissions. So on that point, I'll leave to the if we're doing more about transport later, but it's all about the jobs creation. It's about cleaning up our environment, as you say. But clearly, this is a Greenbelt discussion, so we should not be building on the Greenbelt if we're serious about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Andy, can you hear me?
I can, Zoe.
Okay, off you go.
I would say, the question is, what's the most effective way to reduce the carbon footprint and get to a zero carbon Greater Manchester? It starts with strong and clear leadership, and that's what I've shown on this since 2016. I called a Green Summit for the city region in my first year in office, and that summit set a science-led target for a zero carbon Greater Manchester by 2038. So you've got to start with the big vision. We're one of the few city regions in the country, in the world in fact, to have a science-led target rather than a political-led target. It was supported by the University of Manchester, the Tyndall Centre. So we've got real evidence behind what we're doing. And then how do you get there? It's about obviously transport, it's about energy, it's about buildings. On transport, we'll come back to it later, but the plan is for a zero carbon public transport system that's integrated across the city region. I'll say more about that later. On energy, I've agreed with Electricity Northwest that we can decarbonise the electricity grid by 2038. No other part of the country has an agreement with their main energy supplier. It's a big coup for Greater Manchester. And then lastly, on buildings, we need to retrofit homes, as Laura just said. That can solve both the climate crisis and the jobs crisis coming out of this pandemic. And we've started on decarbonising our public sector estate and retrofitting it. So there's a very big plan. Greater Manchester is in a position of leadership on the green economy because of what I've put in place over the last 4 years.
Thank you, Andy. OK, so moving on to question 2. So COVID has seen many people appreciate and value nature on their doorsteps. It is highly important for biodiversity and the environment, as well as the health and mental well-being of a community. Greater Manchester has been chosen as one of 5 pilot areas in England to help kickstart nature's recovery. So the question will be, are proposals to build on Greenbelt, often the most valuable sites for nature and people, at odds with the strategy? So we're going to start with Simon from Liberal Democrats. Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the basic answer is yes. It is at odds. We should be protecting our wider environment, our green spaces, and our biodiversity across Greater Manchester, and building on it and building roads and adding more air pollution isn't going to help it at all, obviously. I think that's something we can all actually agree on. One of the things that, if we are going to build on green spaces, we should be putting the nature and the environment at the centre of those developments. So if you are building, say, 100 homes, how spaced are they? How compact are they? Are they more compact, so they use up less space, where they go upwards, so they're 3 stories instead of 2? Do they all need garages? Have you got transport there for them to use, or are you going to encourage active travel? Are there natural cycle lanes, pathways, so people don't stray off into fields and woodlands? Are the parks around them usable, clean and inviting? And are we adding more into the wider environment area when we build than we're taking out? And I think that would be something that you would have to look at, and it will be a metric. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That's great. So, Michael, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, off you go.
Developers like building on Greenbelt because it's easy and it's profitable. Lots of people like living overlooking a field. It's the most profitable areas of land. Builders like building on Greenbelt because it's easy. It takes less work and it takes less thought. We have a surplus of brownfield. We have huge swathes of Greater Manchester that have been neglected for the entirety of our lifetimes. We have town centres that are desperately in need of regeneration. We're not in a position where we need to build on Greenbelt. This is a decision born out of laziness. And I think now is a time for innovation. We have residential developments come in 2 forms at the moment, the housing estate type and the apartment block type. There are other types of development possible, and I think we need to move away from the idea of building rows of houses with roads in the middle, or building, you know, the apartment blocks from the cheapest materials for the maximum profit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Melanie, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Super, off you go.
Thank you. Well, I suppose it was no surprise from a Green Party candidate, but yes, I do think that building on Greenbelt does put us at odds with this pilot strategy, absolutely. And I think we need to keep going back to the core questions on this, which is, why are we looking at Greenbelt in the first place? Why aren't we looking at what the alternatives are? There are a great deal of concerns that I've had raised to me that brownfield sites aren't being robustly identified, and that they are avoiding full identification and being therefore put as viable alternatives to Greenfield, and that must stop. We also, and I question very much, why aren't we using what I like to refer to as my policy of make, do, amend? Why have we got empty housing in areas and then we're looking to build new housing elsewhere? We need to be looking at how we deal with the empty housing policies across local authorities and seeing what can be improved there and how we can actually reuse the empty buildings that we've got before we get anywhere near Greenbelt. And then when we do look at Greenbelt, what are we actually doing there? Why are we looking, when I see plans for places like Carrington Moss, where I see huge industrial development with only roads being built as options. Why are we not looking at building communities with inbuilt infrastructure around cycling and around public transport that actually builds a proper community, not just a wasteland in place of this, and where we have real options for integrated transport across the region? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm back on now. Thank you very much.
Okay, off you go.
Fantastic. Well, it's quite clear that we have many valuable sites around Greater Manchester, historic sites, in fact, for the environment that we should be protected within the Greenbelt. And it will come as no surprise that obviously, clearly, we need to protect that the Greenbelt if we are actually going to genuinely want to be able to say that we are working to improve our environment. But there's kind of more than that, isn't there? Because we need to add to that environment. So if we look at our towns and city centres at this moment in time, they are treeless. If we look at Manchester city centre as a perfect example, it is just a concrete jungle. What we need to do is make that area far more effective in taking some responsibility for reducing carbon emissions. And that's going to be done by greening it up. We're going to be planting more trees. And part of the agenda to protect the Greenbelt is to recycle derelict and urban land. And we have a calling now because of the fact that we have had COVID and we have seen the change in our cities and town centres. Now we have the calling to make a huge difference, to make those improvements. It's been escalated because of COVID, but we have an opportunity now to re-energise and reignite those town centres and make them far more environmentally friendly. And so obviously protecting our land, but also really focusing on what we can do so much better, especially in Greater Manchester. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Andy, can you hear me?
I can, Zoe. So to answer the question, is it at odds with this strategy? Obviously, the aim is to minimise building on Greenbelt, but the reality is people need homes as well as good quality green spaces, and that is what the plan that we've developed is trying to do. We have been enhancing the quality of green space across Greater Manchester. We've established the Greater Manchester Environment Fund, which has almost £2 million in it. We are part of the pilot, as was mentioned. The City of Trees initiative I've supported, which is planting a tree for every man, woman and child in Greater Manchester, 3 million across Greater Manchester. We are creating the first public park in city centre Manchester for 100 years as part of the Mayfield development. We've enhanced Barton Moss, Chat Moss with peat, stopping the peat extraction and starting a big programme with the Wildlife Trust of peat restoration. So you can see across the city region there is a plan to enhance our green infrastructure. And I just say at the heart of the question is you've got to kind of live within the framework that the government sets. So the government is imposing housing targets on us, and they constantly change. And as I said before, they've gone up recently. So what we've got to try and do is obviously build the homes people need in the right places and enhance the green space near to them. And if you look at what's happening across our 10 boroughs, you can see that happening in every single borough in Greater Manchester.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And finally, Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Super, off you go when you're ready.
Okay, the proposals are clearly at odds with it. We should not be building on Greenbelt. When you build new houses, you're actually having two negative effects. One, you're building and you're creating a carbon footprint because of all the extra building work, the extra utilities that people are going to have. So you're actually increasing a carbon footprint, but you're increasing the carbon footprint while taking away Greenbelt land. Now, I'm committed to protecting our Greenbelt land because about 8 years ago, I even had solar panels fitted on my house. And with working from home last year, and that you don't need bright sunlight, you just need bright light. We was working carbon neutral free. Our electricity wasn't drawing from the main supplier. We was using our solar panels. And so when people are starting to work from home a lot more, we need to make sure that the houses we are building on Greenbelt, on brownfield sites also have their own form of generation if they can. And just going back to the National Housing Federation report of 2019, they highlighted over 94,000 new dwellings could be built on brownfield sites. That was the National Housing Federation's own report. So it is at odds. We don't need to build on Greenbelt land. We can build on brownfield sites, and we can affect our carbon footprint 2 ways: using brownfield sites and protecting the Greenbelt.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Okay, guys, we're going to move on to question 3. We have heard politicians speak about a brownfield first policy. So the question to you would be, 1, what do you understand a brown first policy to mean? And 2, is a brownfield first policy a priority for you? And if so, how would you implement that during your period of office? And we're going to start with Michael. Off you go when you're ready, Michael.
Well, I think you'll have to ask the existing politicians what they consider it to mean, because evidently it's not necessarily what they're doing. Yeah, I'm certainly in favour of using brownfield first. We have a lot of brownfield sites around Greater Manchester. The spatial framework has a lot of work has gone into putting dots on the map, but it hasn't really gone beyond that. I think with any new development, as well, as well as on what land it's built, we have to make sure it's integrated into the area, into its immediate locality, and also into a cohesive Greater Manchester as a whole. And that's I think that's something to be considered with any new development. At the moment, many of them, particularly on the town centres, particularly around Manchester city centre, they're isolated, so that people people drive from their homes to work, even when it's a 5-minute walk away. I think that's something that has to be looked at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. Melanie, can you hear me?
I can, Zoe, yes, thank you.
Okay, off you go.
Thanks. Well, the starting point when looking at brownfield is really to come back to the point I made around make, do and mend. That's sort of where I see a lot of the opportunities across Greater Manchester, looking at, are we properly identifying, as I've already mentioned, what brownfield sites there are, and whether we are actually properly looking at them, and not just not allowing the sort of definitions to be missing opportunities for it. And so I'm aware, for example, that there are 1,500 undeveloped brownfield sites across Greater Manchester that we could use to deliver more than half of the 201,000 homes that the Greater Manchester Combined Authority wants to build by 2024. Now, that is a really worrying position for me to hear that as a statistic, and then to still be discussions about building on Greenbelt. And I think the really key focus has got to be, what is our Greenbelt and what is it used for? And to really appreciate it, it's not just there as a site that can be developed or as a buffer between the towns and the countryside. It is, as we've been saying throughout, it is for people, it is for our nature and our natural environment. It has such an important role in flood control. It's there to provide us with food, and it's there as a really key part of this ongoing battle to save our planet and to address the climate emergency. So yes, absolutely, we should have a system where we are fully utilising sites that need to be redeveloped within our city centres and brownfields before we even look at Greenbelt land. So absolutely, this would be my key focus, to make sure we are using those sites that have been identified that aren't being used yet. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you so much. Have we got Laura? Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to actually follow on from what Andy Burnham said with regard to the Mayfield development. He's absolutely right. That is a site that was recently had a deal for brownfield site regeneration on that, and I think that's part of a government initiative for £54 million. 23 million of that went, I think, on that, and that sparked a great working relationship between public and private sector. So what we need to do is to, for my take on brownfield, it's to promote and support the development of underutilised land and buildings, and especially if this helps to meet the identified needs for housing where land supply is short. And we can use these, I'll give some examples: converting space above shops and buildings, or above old service yards, car parks, railway infrastructure, as we're saying with Mayfield. There's many areas of brownfield, old factories, warehouses. Now, if we look at the shops alone, we know our city centres have suffered some impact from COVID. This is an opportunity, as I keep saying, a very positive opportunity to regenerate and reinvest and get those really great affordable houses in the right places. They will have the infrastructure there already. So clearly, we should be bold in our plans. We should use and have an excellent directory of all the brownfield sites that we have, and a mayor who worked with the government would be able to lobby for more money to make sure that we get those sites used and converted, and work with the public and private sector to develop those sites even better. So as I say, it's an opportunity. There are many types of brownfield sites, and that is absolutely what we should be focusing on for the future. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Laura. Andy, can you hear me?
Thanks, Zoe. Yes, I can. Well, just to follow on from what Laura was saying, I have worked with the government and secured significant brownfield funding for Greater Manchester, not just for Mayfield, but actually for sites right across the city region. And that's why we've been able to shift the burden of development away from Greenfield and Greenbelt. To answer the question, I said I would put a brownfield first policy at the heart of GMSF, and I have done. It's actually termed brownfield preference, which is the government's preferred wording, so we have to go in line with what they say, and that means that if there are two developable sites, you go first to the brownfield site and you build there before you take any green sites, and that policy is at the heart of our GMSF. I think when we come back to this issue, well, can you only do brownfield? The reality is, and this is the reality that I think other candidates need to address, if you only built on brownfield, we wouldn't hit the government's housing target, and we can't ignore those targets. It's not as if say, oh, we'll just ignore them and I'll be the mayor that says, sorry, we're not doing it. Because if you do that, the government can take over and they will just build where they want. Or if you say scrap the plan, as I've heard a lot on this hustings this morning, does that protect the Greenbelt? Honestly, I don't think so, because then you've no framework. You've given, in many ways, you created a field day for developers to get onto those greenfields, because there is no strong plan in place. So absolutely brownfield first, I would call it, but brownfield preference in the government's definition. That is what we've done. And that is why I've achieved a 60% reduction in Greenbelt take. But I can't ignore the government targets. And we try and build as much as we can in city centre Manchester, in Salford, and many of our boroughs are building below housing need because of the existence of our plan. Other candidates need to say, how would they protect the Greenbelt simply by ripping up the plan? Because I haven't heard it this morning.
Thank you, Andy. I'm sure later on there may be a couple of questions around brownfield first and places for everyone that we might be able to just go over, but we'll see how we go for time. Thank you. Let's have Stephen Morris. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Off you go.
Yeah, one of the things with brownfield sites is not all of them are actually inside the urban areas. Some of them are within Greenbelt areas, and for me, you have to put the further restrictions, because if you allow certain developments on them brownfield sites that are situated within the Greenbelt areas, then that could cause greater problems for the Greenbelt, and therefore you allow expansion from there. And that, to me, that would be a no. So you'd have to restrict what was being built on brownfield sites, specifically located within a Greenbelt area, because some are. And just picking on something that Andy said about us scrapping the Greater Manchester framework and all this, let's just bear in mind we've had 4 years of Labour talking about this spatial framework. 4 years and it's back to square one. They've just failed completely. And we need now to say, right, this is our plan. We need to go to government and say, this is our plan. We will use brownfields first. We will restrict what's being built in brownfield sites within the Greenbelt area. And this is our plan going forward. But we need not just strong leadership, we need effective leadership. We need people who are going to stand up for this area and say, this is what we will do and we will implement it. Not 4 years down the line where we're back to square one with no plan. This is what Labour's got. They've got no plan. They've now got no Greater Manchester Spatial Framework Plan. It's dead in the water. They're trying to rebrand it as something else. So 4 years of a failed Labour plan on the Greenbelt. We need to say, this is our plan. No building on Greenbelt. Brownfield sites within Greenbelt, it will be limited, and we will target the brownfield sites within the city urban areas for further development, but they will have restrictions on them what we require that is suitable for the people of Greater Manchester as well.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, we're going to have a last candidate on this question. So Simon, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you very much. Brownfield first or brownfield preference, you know, I applaud the work done to get a lot of the former planned houses onto brownfield. We still know that developers and some councils are land banking some land for future use. That is brownfield or is derelict or is not unused at the moment. We know that there are thousands of empty properties across Greater Manchester. We should be making them be brought back into use. Talk about scrapping the GMSF, and something we said 4 years ago in 2017 when our mayor was last elected. We do need a plan, but we need a plan that's from the bottom up rather than the top down. And we can talk about the GMSF being Greater Manchester's plan, or the whatever name it is now, but it was done from the top down. And I think that's been the real problem with a lot of people. They've seen these plans with executive 4-bedroom houses on Greenbelt and think, well, my kids aren't going to be able to afford to live there. And you're only building roads to there. I think that was the disjointness of the plan, and still is in some cases. So yes, we do need a plan, but it needs to be community-led. Community involvement is key to actually getting this over the line, because no one's saying we don't need more homes. We probably will need more homes. They need to be energy efficient. They need to be carbon neutral. They need to be looking to the future. Passive house standards, for instance, is something we should be looking at. But using the brownfield first and using all these derelict sites has to be key. I mean, I do actually think Stephen has a point about in old industrial land in Greenbelt that we need to watch.
You there, Simon? I'm
Yes,
so
thank you
sorry,
very much.
but very well articulated. Thank you. So we're going to now move on to question 4. So our campaign started because communities care deeply about where they live and they feel that nobody is listening to them. In the last year, our groups have seen a surge in membership because the pandemic has given us the opportunity to rediscover our local areas. And people quite rightly want to have a say what's happening in their locality. Tom Fyans, CPRE Deputy Chief Executive, said, "We all deserve to have a say in shaping the communities around us." SGMGB has seen that being involved in planning is a gateway to get more people involved in civic life. So our question to candidates is, if elected during the period of your office, what would you do to increase participation in planning? And we're going to start with Melanie, please.
Hi, Zoe. Okay, well, I think actually the idea that we should have people involved in planning is absolutely and fundamentally key to making an effective opposition to things like building on Greenbelt. There are so many times when I know friends who are within the planning system have said, we didn't get any objections at planning stage. We didn't get any objections at a time when something could actually be, there was an effective opposition. But we're now in a situation where we have people, and very legitimately protesting, but people protesting in trees, in tunnels, in whatever else, and there will only be a certain amount of time that will be effective for. Had they come in right at the start when the development was in planning stage, there would have been a lot more effective opposition. And I think this comes back to a wider problem of people just not understanding how to be engaged in politics and the political processes that we have in place. So actually, I think education and informing and the society as a whole, but also running campaigns with our young people who are very interested in the environment. And we see that through the climate strikes and their amazing actions to save our planet, to actually understand that protest has a massively legitimate place, but also there is some very clever ways that you can go and impact on what's happening in our area by understanding how the politics works. So that would be my key development in office.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Laura, can you hear me?
I can, thank you very much. Can you see me? Yes, great. Well, a lot of what Melanie said, it will be reiterated by me. I mean, clearly we're only here today because of the power of your group and the decisions that you've made to protect your area. And those decisions really need to be part of the decision making, full stop, and any planning. And I think it's really right that we should look to make sure that we have a space on both on the local councils, so that they have neighbourhood forums, neighbourhood areas where they can discuss planning issues, and then obviously where we have plans made locally. Now we've missed out on that because in Greater Manchester, in waiting for this overarching plan that was going to save the Greenbelt, many councils didn't get together and didn't get those plans in place, and that has led to the risky place that we are now. 4 years of actually developers being able to develop all over the Greenbelt because we didn't have a plan in the right places. So we need to make sure that you're at the front of those conversations. We also need to make sure we get those local plans done extremely quickly, and then overarching on that, a theme for Greater Manchester with a vision moving forward. But it's absolutely right, as Simon said, it must come from the ground up. It can't be dictated over by an external body who's just going to implement change without any connectivity to infrastructure, without doctors' surgeries and all of the things that would be needed around those areas. So it's very, very important that your voices and people's voices in those areas are listened to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Andy, can you hear me?
So if elected, what would I do to increase participation? Well, I've done it, and I would continue to do it. I really value this campaign. I've worked with you over the last 4 years. I would continue to work with you both as an umbrella campaign and individually. And I think you have helped us improve the plan. If you look across Greater Manchester, borough by borough, you can see sites that have come out because of your campaigning and because we listened to you in Wigan, in Bolton, in Bury. Simister, for instance, is a recent example of that. In Oldham, recent changes there that Sean Fielding has put forward. In Trafford, to be honest, Laura was talking about the 2016 plan as though it was a Labour plan. Trafford, I think Laura supported the 2016 plan. So I've done all of those things because I've been listening to you and I've been involving you. We've had consultations. And this gets to the heart of it. You know, I've been accused as well this morning for not having a plan, and I've failed on that. Well, which is it? You know, do we take time to listen and take time to get it right, or do I bulldoze through a plan, which I could have done, but I haven't done because I have been taking time to listen, to make changes. The point is, involve people, yes, but it's got to be give and take, hasn't it? We can't just say to campaigners, you can have everything you want, never anything on Greenbelt. That wouldn't be realistic. And I think what is threatening the Greenbelt at the moment is political opportunism, where parties are voting down plans just for political point scoring and actually not coming up with a credible alternative.
Thank you for that, Andy. I'm sure we'll have some questions on that later. OK, let's go to Stephen. Can you hear me, Stephen?
Yes, I can. I've been active in home watch groups, the campaigning on to stop building on Greenbelt land in the run up to the 2017 mayoral election. I was actually the only mayoral candidate who turned up to one in Tildesley to campaign against building on Greenbelt there, which happened to be Andy Burnham's old constituency at the time. He didn't bother turning up. None of the others did. I did. I am an activist. What I say, I do. So I have been on these protests to stop building on Greenbelt land. To engage with people, you've got to get down on the grassroots. I'm also a trade union general secretary of a trade union. I speak to people on grassroots day in, day out of what concerns them. So I know every day the issues that affect them, their families, the public transport, which I worked on for 15 years, retail, which I worked in for 15 years. So I have an experience and a knowledge of what we need to do to engage people. At the moment, the Melt is just not engaging people properly. I proposed in 2017, and I still do it now, is to hold mayoral surgeries all around the boroughs, in each borough, not just to hide away in central Manchester, where people seem distant, people in the top end of Wigan or Bolton or in the top end of Rochdale or Oldham. They don't have any affiliation to the centre of Manchester, but they want to see the people who they're voting for go and see them. So it's got to be about getting out on the ground and going visiting people, not hiding away in a town hall.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, off you go.
Yeah, I think I spoke about it in my last answer about creating these community forums, and there's these ideas of citizens' assemblies and neighbourhood groups, and all of these things can fit together to create more activism in our communities and more involvement. I think for far too long in Greater Manchester we've had what are so-called safe seats, whether they're at council level or parliamentary level, and I think that leads to a disinterest in politics. And planning is part of politics, it's part of governance, and the two do go hand in hand. Where people are apathetic, they don't seek out problems, and then they realise something's happening and they want to protest against it. We need to actually fill that gap in between. I mean, I'm for political education at school. I think I'm for votes at 16 as well, but that's another issue. But I think educating our teenagers about civic duty and how important their vote is to them and how important their involvement is in politics and local governance is something that we should be doing. I mean, there's always the debate about it won't be good for bigger parties because people will actually start questioning their policies more.
I'll stop there, Simon.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, thank you so much. Okay, so Michael, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, off you go.
Well, it's very much a part of my ethos to get people involved. I want to put ideas into practice based on their own merits, and the more good ideas, the better. So I'm hoping this meeting really will just be the beginning, and certainly when lockdown restrictions have eased, I'll be able to come and meet all of you in person to listen to your ideas. And if I am elected, I'll hold regular assemblies so that I can report directly to you, to all the people, and tell you what I've been doing, not just regards to planning, but regards to everything that I've been doing. And I want to hear, the more ideas, the better, so that those can be put into practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. That's great. Okay, let's move to question 4, please, Yaz.
Question 5, Paul.
5, sorry. So we need a public transport system that is viable, sustainable, affordable and reliable. The question will be, if elected during the period of your office, what is your vision for public transport? And we're going to start with Laura, please.
Hello again, thank you. Yeah, fantastic. Well, obviously, public transport is absolutely huge on the agenda, and we need to make sure that it works. I'm absolutely pro a partnership model with the buses. I want interconnectivity with the ticketing system. I want to make sure that they're far more integrated with the ability on apps to be able to know what buses are coming when. It would be great to know that we wouldn't have piles of congestion in the middle of towns when roads are dug up. So we need to look at how we address that, and there should be much more. How many times I've been told they've just laid that road and now they've dug it all up again. So there's no connectivity of thought about that. So and that will drive people, if we have good transport systems, if we get like road network trains back, which we're hoping to get rebuilt and put back on track again, then clearly people will have the natural urge to move over to those systems. But that will take time. And I think during that time, there's easy wins. For example, a bus partnership where we can enable ourselves to have an integrated connection, as I say, make sure that we have good, clean, fixed roads so that we can enable people to use electric cars because we put in electric charging points. There's going to be a whole mix of transport. It won't just be buses that are cleaner and greener with bus corridors. There'll be buses, trams, trains, electric cars, a whole system in place that will hopefully make people want to use other forms of transport besides that will pollute the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Andy, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Zoe. What's the vision? I've set that out already in what we call our network. So that is a plan for a London-style public transport system in Greater Manchester that is about cycling and walking for the first mile, a reformed bus system linking into Metrolink, and then bringing the trains under public control. A London-style system, it means integrated ticketing. Single tap in, tap out. And what I will say this morning, Zoe, is that the time has come to reform the buses in Greater Manchester, and there's a big decision looming on that. So I won't say much more about it, other than whichever way we go on it, I'm clear about what we want. A tram and bus system that is integrated, that has a single cap over what people can spend. So they can take as many buses in one day as they want, or as many trams in as one day as they want, but it is capped at how much they can spend. Metrolink already runs on renewable energy, and imagine an all-electric bus fleet in the same livery also running on renewable energy. I think this is a vision for a world-class city region, the kind of transport that you see in other European cities. We've got a plan to do that. We want to work with the government to deliver that plan. We think that will be a brilliant example of levelling up. And Greater Manchester's done the hard work. We've done the thinking. The plan is ready to go. We now just need to get on with it.
Thank you, Andy. We're going to go to Stephen now. Can you hear me, Stephen?
Yes, I can.
Off you go.
Okay. I worked in retail, like I said, for 15 years in various managers' roles. I also worked on the trams for 15 years, covering various roles. I know how the tram system works. I know what is required. I'm General Secretary of the Workers of England Union. I represent many bus drivers in London. I travel around London a lot. I know the pitfalls. It's not just to say, well, we want a London-style ticketing system. There are pitfalls. I know the pitfalls. I know how it affects bus drivers and what the problems are. But I want a one ticket, which I promoted in 2017, and I'm glad it's already been mentioned again, where you just use one pricing. You get on a bus, you can go on as many buses as you want, but it's capped. I had that in 2017. I've got that again on my mini manifesto. So you can get on you tap on the tram, you travel on the tram, get to the end, get on the bus, and you only tap off at the end and it calculates your fare. That's a form of integrated ticketing, but you've got to be aware, London Transport has loads of different organisations and companies, and the bus drivers, the workers, the frontline workers do get affected with the swapping and changing on that. So we also have to look at their welfare. And that's why some of them just recently gone on strike in London. So I have worked in public transport. I represent people in public transport, and I know what we need to do to move it forward, to be fully integrated, and actually for it to work, and to get it done in a reasonable time frame as well.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Simon is next Off you go,
Thank
Simon.
you very much. So we've already heard about integrated ticketing. I would like to see the zone system on the Metrolink put onto trains within Greater Manchester and buses. So you go from zone 5 into zone 1, you pay a price, and that gets you on everything. That would be the integrated ticketing system that would be probably best and like London's, as we're all aware. Promoting the 20-minute neighbourhood through planning, through transport, helping to reduce air pollution and reduce our carbon footprint by actually walking and cycling. Now, it's been very controversial over the past year, all these pop-up cycle lanes. Well, actually, we should be building permanent cycle lanes. You know, the big complaint is from drivers, I drive past and all these cycle lanes are empty, because the cyclists have already used them and they're already a mile ahead of you. We need to be encouraging that for our own health and for our environment. And being able to walk to a bus, a train or a tram within that 15-20 minutes to get people onto public transport and help reduce the overall burden. And yes, electric cars and electric charging points need to be put in place over the next 10 years as we move towards electric vehicles. My big thing is actually a Northern Loop for the Metrolink to actually link Rochdale with Bury into Bolton, into Wigan, and then into the end of the Eccles line. Why should people have to come into Manchester to go back out?
Simon, yeah. I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you so much. Michael, do you want to start?
Yes.
Super.
Well, whenever I speak to anyone from London, they're always complaining about public transport. So franchising in itself isn't necessarily going to help matters. I'm confident I can work with our existing bus operators to provide a fully integrated system of public transport, a ticket that can be used on all different bus companies throughout Greater Manchester, on trams and on trains. And I mentioned earlier that we have a company that makes electric minibuses, and this provides us with a different type of public transport. They have it in other countries. We don't have it here so much. I'd quite like to run this service ourselves, not to franchise it, but actually the combined authority can run it, and it can run it as a call and ride service during the day. We can have them operating on routes which have lower passenger numbers during the rush hours, and then we can use them in the evenings to take people home from theatres or venues or wherever it is busy and is in need of public transport, which we perhaps don't have at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Melanie, can you hear me?
I can, Zoe. Yes, thank you.
Okay, off you go.
I was interested to hear what Simon was saying with regards to the cycle paths, and I think that is something that is very much a key message that I would bring. However, cycle paths, along with other just putting more buses on, putting more trams on, isn't the solution if they don't work together. So the cycle paths must be able to get us to the public transport hubs, and we must have the option to either secure our bicycles there if we just want to go onto the tram off the other end and we're there, but also to put bikes on buses, on trams, as they do across the whole of Europe, so that we have a system where you can cycle on and off if that is what works for you, and it's how to be encouraged. I like the idea that has been suggested of a one ticket does all system across Manchester, but would absolutely be horrified if we expanded a zoning system. I completely agree with what Sean Berry has said with regards to London, that actually penalising people financially for living further out of the city if they want to travel into it is not something I could ever endorse. Finally, I want to look at how do we use transport for pleasure. We should be able to put people onto trains, onto trams, to let them to get to our green spaces and to be able to enjoy them. That includes taking bikes with them. We shouldn't have limits to say you can only take 4 bikes on a train, so every family of 5 or above is immediately taken out of that possibility. It's got to all join up together, and it's got to encourage active travel.
Thank you very much. Super. So we're going to move now on to question 6, and question 6 is going to require me to give you some context. It does contain some figures, so keep your attention on it. Next slide, Yaz. The GMSF forecast a population increase of 187,700 people between 2020 and 2037. Next slide. The most recent GMSF 2020 allowed for a total housing land supply of 208,900 houses to be built. Next slide. The GMSF 2020 proposed building more houses than the forecast increase in people, i.e. 1.1 houses per person. Current housing occupancy rates across GM average at 2.38 people per house. So based on current occupancy rates and the population forecast of 187,700, the GMSF should be planning roughly 78.9 thousand houses. Next slide. Or to put it another way, the GMSF proposed building more houses than an increase in people. So if all the allocations were removed from GMSF 2020, the housing land supply would still be sufficient to build 184,400 houses. This does not take into account any of the additional land which is likely to become available due to changes in working practices caused by the current pandemic. Next slide. Therefore, the current land supply is sufficient to build almost one house per person without building on any Greenbelt land. Next slide. So our question is, do you think it is reasonable to sacrifice Greenbelt land to build more houses than the forecast increase in people? And please explain your response. And we're going to start with Andy.
I think it's complicated is the straightforward answer, in that we've got, firstly, government targets that are driving this. You know, we can't ignore those. And I think there is a concern amongst our leaders that those targets are often inflated to meet a national target in house building. I think you also, though, have to look at this situation where there's more household creation because of people separating. So it isn't just strictly about how many people are coming in to live and how many homes have we got. There is a trend that we're having to deal with, which is obviously there are more households being created, but also, you know, do we have enough affordable homes? And I've been working over the last 4 years to turn around the situation on rough sleeping and homelessness, because clearly we don't have enough homes, and because we don't have enough homes, the price of housing has been artificially inflated, and it's made it very difficult for people to afford new homes. So, you know, in some ways I have some sympathy with your question, and we feel it ourselves, because we've been kind of pushed by the government with inflated targets, and we've called for a methodology which better reflects need rather than the political imperative. And the problem we've got, of course, is that they're going the other way. As I said before, they recently put a massive increase into Manchester's numbers. And the problem with that, of course, is it then is more difficult for us to offset other authorities building under target in some of our different boroughs. So it's a good question, but it's a complex answer because it's not as simple as the question appears to suggest. And what I would say is there is a disconnect between what the government says at national level, driving everybody hard to build more homes, and then opposing it at local level, as we saw in Stockport. I would say that's politics, and what we need to do is take the politics out of this.
Okay, thank you, Andy. We're going to go to Stephen next. Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I am aware of certain figures which we already have more land to build on and we don't have to sacrifice Greenbelt land. That's why I'm dead set against building on Greenbelt land. All the projections are just projections, the figures that they pluck out the air. And we noticed that after 4 years, the Labour Mayor still doesn't commit one way or the other, tries to blame other people. That's not strong leadership. Strong leadership is saying, the figures suggest we don't have to build on Greenbelt land, we're not building on Greenbelt land, and we will review the figures a couple of years down the line, continually to review them to see how it progresses. But at this moment in time, you should be saying to the government, the figures don't support what you're saying, no building on Greenbelt land, and that's the end of it. You know, that's strong, effective leadership, not trying to blame it on other people. All right, the figures don't support building on Greenbelt land, and that's an actual fact. And as we know, we're going to have a new census out shortly. We're going to have the issues of different working practices coming up. So everything's going to change over the next couple of years. So the figures will have to be revised. However, at this time, no building on Greenbelt land. The figures don't support it. That's it. Go away. Revise your figures.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Stephen. Simon, off you go. I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, the phrase of the year. So we know that the industrial and commercial figures for Greater Manchester were based off growth rates over the past 10 years. COVID has changed that. So do we know that all of our commercial space is going to be used, that we've already got? Do we need more commercial space? And as Laura said earlier, using commercial space in a new way. So do I think it's reasonable to sacrifice Greenbelt land to build more houses than the forecast increase in people? At this moment, no. Your figures, well done everyone for getting them and sorting those figures out, don't add up. So we shouldn't be using the Greenbelt. And I think, as I've said before, a lot of that Greenbelt building isn't the right type of houses. We need social housing, we need housing associations, and we need truly affordable housing to help get people off the streets and into supported living so they can become part of society. And at the moment, we're hell-bent on just building these executive houses out in the Greenbelt, and we're not actually dealing with the people that are still on housing waiting lists that can't afford to move out of rented accommodation and into their own home. And I think that's acutely where in Manchester City Centre with the apartments. Some of them are going for northwards of £700 a month. How are you supposed to save for a deposit there? So I think we will see next year with the census a rejig, and we should look at those figures for growth over the next 10 years. And I will leave it there because I see my time's up now.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you. Okay, Michael, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, off you go.
I mean, the other thing that we have to consider is that our high streets were struggling pre-COVID. We're not over it yet. It may be that many of them are decimated after COVID. You know, our town centres, they need regeneration. That's another place for potentially building affordable homes. I mean, the Labour candidate seems to think that it's an impossibility to avoid building on Greenbelt, but that's quite frankly a complete and utter load of rubbish. We've seen the figures. There's no need to build on Greenbelt. I'm wondering. Well, I'm wondering also whether the Labour candidate thinks it's appropriate to be awarding contracts prior to the spatial framework plans even being finalised. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That's great. Melanie, can you hear me?
I can, yes, Zoe. Thank you.
Off you go.
The quick and easy answer to this question is absolutely not. Absolutely not do I think it is reasonable to build on Greenbelt in a way where we are building houses we don't need. I come back to a point I made earlier around make, do and mend. We have got across the region areas where there are empty houses which are not just sitting there unused, but also have a serious impact on the community in which they are, where they can seem to become areas for antisocial behaviour, and where that leads to real problems within our communities. And actually, looking at those areas not just tackles a avoidance of building on Greenbelt, but it also has much bigger and very important societal impacts that I think we cannot overlook. And I could get into a point that was made previously. What is the housing that we are planning to build on the Greenbelt? You know, when I've been in discussions, people with me are saying, but Melanie, these are 4-bedroom detached houses where we can have a number of Range Rovers parked on the drive. That's not what we need. We need social housing and affordable housing so that actually those who are on these extraordinary waiting lists, desperate to be housed, can actually find somewhere to live and a home for themselves and start to be part of that community. And so that ties in with my make, do and mend point. Let's actually reinvigorate these. Let's look at areas where, you know, there are eyesores, where there's sort of empty, derelict buildings around the place, and let's use that and sort those problems out and bring with it a massively effective change. And also regeneration within the city centres allows us to have things like active travel, cycling and walking, using public transport, much more than a housing development stuck out in the countryside where your only option feasibly is to drive to get to and from your home. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melanie. And Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, clearly I've given my response on that. There's just no way that we need to build on the Greenbelt. And I think we need to really use that fire to actually reignite our high streets and redevelop those and our town centres. This is a fabulous opportunity to do that. And we know we need to, so we should. But there are a couple of things. So I think the delay in this election has meant that Andy's now facing what he wouldn't have been facing. If he'd been re-elected last year, this would not be on the table. It would have been done and dusted. So this election is really very important because it's going to say to people, are you going to stop what's happening, or are you going to continue on and have the Greenbelt built on? They're right about the 4-bedroom detached houses. That isn't going to be affordable housing. This is why we need smaller houses in areas that are connected and already have the infrastructure. There's no reflection of windfall sites in the GMSF as it was. And now clearly we need to raise that up and say, for anybody that doesn't know, that means that sites have become available. And of course, because of COVID, we should be using those sites to our best advantage to make sure that we put those homes. And I think it's a very exciting opportunity to redevelop, as I say, our town centres and our high streets in a different way. If you look at somewhere like Durka, which was an interesting site, lots and lots and lots of houses there, but a lot of them have also been knocked down, but they're not, as I'm aware of, in the GMSF, and also all the new places for everyone, as this soft sell that we're having, but they are in fact an area that's ripe for development. And the reason they're not developed, I think the obvious reason is because it's more expensive to do that, and that should not hold us back. The cost of brownfield sites redevelopment being more expensive, we should challenge that. We should get the government, who's already given, as we said, £54 million already given retrofitting buildings of our town hall, £80 million. This is government money and lots of money towards making sure that we have safer streets. So the delay in this has actually allowed us now to challenge it, to stop it, and to make a difference. And I think it's important that we remember that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura. Okay, so Yasmin. We're going to move to, did we have any questions come in?
Just the 2 that I've texted you.
Right, okay, so one question from one group was, I really liked Andy's point of building in town centres and not building for the car, but this seems to be directly contradictory to Rochdale's oversupplying by 170%, that's through the government's housing delivery test, yet still having a number of Greenbelt developments in the plan of 9. So that was one comment. And then what was the other one? Yasmin, it's not come through to me.
I've just sent it through, sorry.
Oh, if it's brownfield first, why are Greenbelt sites being built on first in the plan? It's a 19-year plan. All right, okay. So basically, groups want to know is why, when this plan comes out with Greenbelt in it, why is all the Greenbelt being released at the start? Why can the Greenbelt not be kept back and brownfield used first and Greenbelt kept to the very end of the plan? So Andy, you could answer that if you could.
Okay, Zoe, I think it is in many places. So there is a phased release, and it is contingent upon the earlier sites being done. Now, that may not be the case everywhere, and we're still open to hearing people's representations, but that is the logic of the plan that we've created. And I was pleased that people endorsed the idea of town centre regeneration first. I mean, the Stockport Mayoral Development Corporation is a fantastic example. I think it's going to be a national template for how it's done. You know, 3,500 homes in Stockport town centre under the famous arches. I think it's going to be brilliant. And I've said to the other 9 boroughs, we would have an MDC in all of those boroughs to do proper master planning and rebuilding, and that would include Rochdale as well. So just to answer the Rochdale point specifically, Zoe, I mean, in the end, I'm not imposing a plan on people. People have talked about a bottom-up plan here this morning, and they're right to say that, because in the end, it is the 10 districts that are kind of coming to me saying this is what they want. I can't force them to accept what I want. What I've tried to do is create a framework to move the plan in a different direction. And I think you'd be really hard pressed to say the plan hasn't moved in a substantially different direction from the plan that we had in 2016. Is it perfect? No, it's always going to have to be a compromise of a kind. But I think there is a clear shift towards town centres as part of this plan. And to pick up Michael's point, could it go even further? Possibly. And I certainly will keep on supporting that drive towards revitalising our town centres with more affordable homes built closer to public transport.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're going to move now to closing statements, and if we can just have the next slide, Yaz, please. So each candidate is going to have 2 minutes to close, and we're going to start with Laura. Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, can you see me?
No.
Can you see me now?
Yes.
It went all blurry, so I felt, and I haven't had a drink or anything because I don't drink, so there you go. So on my closing statements, I just wanted to say that we need leadership and we need vision. We have an opportunity here to make a difference. And I think in December, when we saw the GMSF fall, I know many of us, I watched it all night long, everybody did. We were absolutely delighted to see it fall. And nothing in my mind thought that we would actually see it come back to the table, so quickly. And if the mayor was seriously keen to make sure that he listened to people and listened to the people that had made such a difference to get it stopped, then you would have thought he did delayed going ahead with the firstly with the consultation, which should never have been done under COVID. I think that was absolutely ridiculous. And then secondly, on top of that, he should have listened to those people and taken time to reconsider and reflect, not to come here now and say, oh, I'm listening to you all now. Well, it's a little bit late because the May elections are coming and we're all going to be standing on this platform. So if I was selected to be your council, I will support our councils. Let's not forget they're very important to create their own local plans. I will ensure we have residents and neighbourhoods at the very front of that. I will make sure that we have a comprehensive, clear data on brownfield register. That's everything that we can find to put on that register. And I'll make sure we have the opportunities to build the good affordable homes that we need in the right places. And I will do it without touching the Greenbelt. The mayor has had 4 years to do it and he has failed, so it's time for someone else. So on May the 6th, it will come down to my plan to save the Greenbelt and build back better in those town centres and make that huge difference that's so important to everybody, and working with the government, or we can risk it all. So I leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura. Okay, Andy, when you're ready.
Okay.
No, sorry, Andy, it wasn't you. Sorry, I'm reading down my list. It was Stephen Morris. Apologies.
Okay. Yeah. as previously stated, we've had 4 years of Labour, 4 years of Andy Burnham, 4 years of failure, nothing that's been put out to do with policing failures, transport failures, planning failures. The Greenbelt has not been done, it's not been completed, it is just another massive failure. And if you expect things to be done under another 4 years of Labour and Andy Burnham, then you'd be very disappointed, because it won't be. You want not just strong leadership, you want effective leadership, leadership from people who have been on the front line speaking to people on those demonstrations against building on Greenbelt land, who's worked in public transport, who's worked in retail, who knows the issues facing people on a day-to-day basis, and who is actively in the community, not hiding away in the town hall. And going forward, COVID has changed a lot of things. It's changed how we will view public transport, because not so many people can get on it. They want social distance. We will view how the high street is dealt with. I came out the high street in '99 because I saw it declining then. But you've got the out of town shopping centres. Are they still going to be viable? I've been there. I've done the jobs in them areas. I know what affects people. I know what London transport is like. As a trade union general secretary, I've represented people in London. I've seen the bus drivers, I know their concerns, and I don't want their concerns being just brought up to Manchester because it's a London style of system. We need to make sure it's a Greater Manchester style of system, one that suits the people here, not just picking one from London that may not be suitable. And that's why I say that I'm the ideal candidate for this, and not the failure of Labour over the last 4 years.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen. We're going to now go to Melanie. Melanie, can you hear me?
I can, yes. I'll attempt the camera. It'll turn on. No, I think
that it's okay if it doesn't, don't worry. Melanie, if you just want
can
to
you hear me?
that's absolutely fine, yeah.
Yeah, it all crashed. 1 minute, so off again. Okay. So when Greens are talking about politics, they often talk about the impact of having our Green in the room. And the key message that we have from the Green Party and from myself is that this election, and me being elected as mayor, gives us the opportunity to put a Green in every room across all of the boroughs, where I can raise the issues that we are talking about here, and I can raise them seriously and with passion that I've spoken today. I want to see a Greater Manchester where there is not an automatic view that we will just build on Greenbelt. I want to see a Greater Manchester where we actually think about transport, and where it is designed to enable people to live and to work and to just enjoy themselves in Greater Manchester. I should be able to cycle to my tram stop, pop into town when we're allowed to again, and take the children out to enjoy what the city centre offers. I should be able to go the other way and go out into the countryside easily, and I shouldn't have to think, have I got to get in a car to do this? And that is something that I would bring, and I've got the experience of seeing how these things work across Europe where I was brought up. With regards to housing, why would we consider for a minute building on Greenbelt when we have got brownfield sites that are not either being identified properly or just not even being considered first as they should be? And that has got to change. And really, as we've all talked about how important we found our green spaces over the last year, let's actually open them up so people can get to them. We should be able to cycle easily to those green spaces and be able to get out into nature and enjoy what it gives to us, our mental health improving, seeing the biodiversity and seeing how beautiful our area actually is. And really crucially, we've got to inform and empower our community to engage and to know how and when to engage with things like planning and politics in a wider scheme. And that involves properly working with groups that have got a vested interest in where our developments are, community groups who know what the issues are around their area, but also our young people, and helping them to understand and to engage more. So those are the visions I would bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you. If we move on to Michael next.
Yes.
Off you go.
Well, firstly, something I haven't mentioned is that I'm very much in favour of walkways. And by walkways, I don't just mean pavements adjacent to roads. I think during lockdown, people have been walking far more, and it's a good opportunity to give us to give us walkways surrounded by amenities that give us direct links between our town centres and between residential developments and their own localities. I think that's something that is rarely considered. So thanks for having me. And as I said before, it's very much in my ethos to meet people and to listen to your ideas, and I hope I'll have the opportunity to do that in the forthcoming months. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Michael. Okay, Andy, if you'd like to go next.
Thanks, Zoe, and thanks everybody for being a part of this and every other candidate's contributions. When I stood in 2017, I promised a radical rewrite of the then GMSF that we had, and that's exactly what I've done, with a 60% reduction in the Greenbelt take. I didn't promise to scrap it, as candidates have done on this call this morning, pretty much every other candidate. Why? Because it wouldn't have been a realistic pledge to make to you. It would have been dishonest, because you can't just ignore government house building targets. I'm afraid the government will take over the process if we tried to do that, as they have done in other local authorities. We have to come up with a credible plan for how we build the homes we're being required to build, but building them in the right places. And I wasn't going to make it very political, but Laura was, kind of aiming things in my direction. Laura supported the 2016 plan, which would have taken double the amount of homes on Greenbelt than the plan as it exists at the moment. So I think people have got to beware sort of opportunistic politics. The GMSF allows a number of our boroughs to build below their housing needs. So Trafford, Bury, Tameside, Stockport all are building fewer homes than if they wouldn't have been in the GMSF. And to say people cheered when Stockport went down, well, I would just say to everybody cheering, how are you then going to build the extra 5,000 homes that you now will have to find because you're no longer in GMSF? That is just the reality. And I think we need to kind of deal with the complexity of this rather than just make easy statements. Because if you scrap the plan, as we've heard today, just put it in the bin, is the Greenbelt going to be more secure by doing that or less secure? I would say less secure, because developers then can have a field day as they go across Greater Manchester, building where they want to build rather than when we want to build. And to finish, Stephen saying I've done nothing on anything. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough to say that. I've massively reduced rough sleeping in Greater Manchester since 2017. I've given young people, 16 to 18-year-olds, a free bus pass, which wasn't there before, which has changed their lives. We've got the biggest cycling and walking network under construction, and we've got a very credible plan for a zero carbon Greater Manchester by 2038. That is action, that is leadership.
Thank you,
That's
Andy.
what I will do more of if re-elected.
Thank you, Andy. And finally, Simon from Liberal Democrats. You can start when you're ready.
Thank you. I see other hands up from other candidates. The Liberal Democrats have always been the party of the community. We believe in communities having the right to decide what goes on in their communities. We want to empower them, we want to lift them up, and we want them to lead on what happens in their community. And I think when people ask, what are Liberal Democrats for, what do you believe in? That's the core of what we believe in. I mean, we've spoken about integrated transport and active travel to reduce pollution. We've spoken about brownfield first. Liberal Democrat policy has been in place for the past, well, since 2016 when the plan came out. We've spoken about repurposing our town centres and empowering independent small businesses to fit into empty shop units to help us recover and build back better. We're talking about levelling up. We're talking about creating that transport system that's easier to use and more cost effective and cheaper for people to use. So I've really enjoyed being part of this hustings, because I think a lot of us, we can all pile out political bluster and get angry about what everyone else has said and what we've said. but I think the point we're all here, we actually care about Greater Manchester. We care about Greater Manchester's future, and we want it to be better, and we want it to be more inclusive, and we want to empower the 2.7 million people that actually live, work and are growing up and going to school and using our services across Greater Manchester. And I think that figure of 2.7 million, we've only got 2.2 million people registered to vote. So I would say you've got a few more weeks to get registered. Make sure more people are registered to vote. And if you don't want to go to a polling station, get a postal vote. But I would love to see a huge turnout on May the 6th for the GM mayoral race. I think our city deserves it and has earned it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon, and thank you to all our candidates. You've been absolutely fantastic. So, yes, could we just go on to the next slide, please? So just to finish up and to close up, we're going to put a little request out, and a request is, and we're going to ask you to answer by putting your hand up, is if you are elected as mayor, will you agree to meet with Save Greater Manchester's Greenbelt and discuss, respond or follow up on points raised? So if we could have a show of hands, that would be absolutely fantastic. Oh, thank you so much. We've got a full house. That's brilliant. So the next thing we've developed is our groups have developed a pledge, and I'm going to read through the pledge. I'm not going to ask you to sign up to it today, but what I want you to do is consider it, and if you feel that you could support it, to return it to us by Monday the 22nd of March. So if you can just click onto that, Yaz. So if elected, I will remove all Greenbelt allocations from Places for Everyone until a detailed post-COVID review of brownfield land and windfall sites has been undertaken with communities in each impacted borough, and all developments which propose building new office space. I will work with Save Greater Manchester Greenbelt Group to review land supply lists to ensure not 1 hectare of Greenbelt is released unnecessarily. So that is the pledge, and that will be emailed out to you. If you feel that you can support it, if you can please return it to us, that would be great. Can we just go to the next slide, Yaz, please? So our closing statement is very short. So basically, we want the person who is elected to be a voice for all in Greater Manchester. But if you're not elected, we still need you to come together and work for the greater good of all GM residents. And with that, we're going to wish everybody good luck, and we hope to speak to you all soon. And can our group stay behind? And that closes the hustings. Thank you.